The light above me is so bright, it feels personal, like it has decided I'm the one it will burn into. Stainless steel breathes cold against my back. A monitor ticks in a strict little metronome beep. Pause. Beep, each tone hammering into the softest parts of my skull. Someone adjusts a metal tray. Instruments answer with a delicate clatter, the sound of a ritual I've already agreed to. I tell myself calm is a choice, and for a moment I pretend I can choose it. Through the observation glass, Sloane. Her arms are folded as if she's keeping her bones from flying apart. Her lipstick looks like a cut. Beside her stand her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Kincaid, polished as a sermon, his old money tie pin, her pearls reflecting the surgical light like tiny, watchful moons. They don't look at me so much as over me. Toward the paperwork shelved near the anesthesia cart. Signed forms. Consent. My name, Elena Duarte, in my careful cursive, already trapped beneath ink. If you're listening, if you can hear my voice from wherever you are, tap like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge from. I need to know how far truth can travel, because today, truth has to run faster than fear. A nurse tapes an electrode to my chest. The air smells of iodine and lemon disinfectant. I try to swallow and feel an old splinter of panic catch midway. The surgeon doctor, Alma Halverson, appears in my narrowing field of vision. She has that precise, calm people mistake for softness. It's not softness. It's a blade in a velvet sheath. Elena, she says, we're going to start your pre-oxygenation. You'll feel a mask, slow breaths, in through your nose if that's more comfortable. Her gloved hand is warm against my wrist. She's wearing a small brooch no one else would dare in an oar. A silver heron, wing outstretched. Your son's team is ready next door. Noah, my oldest. Stronger than both of my arms put together once, now a pale shore the tide has abandoned. They say my kidney will be the raft that carries him back. I hold that picture steady and ignore the quieter one, Sloane's voice cutting through my kitchen weeks ago, sliding a stack of forms between the teacups like a card trick. Another picture, me signing anyway, because mothers make bargains with their own bodies long before there are contracts to witness it. I breathe into the cupped mask. The rubber smells faintly like a room I used to mop at the river market. My husband Miguel would be asleep now in his chair, the stroke years pulling his words into a drawer I can't open. I picture his hand, warm and too still. I tell myself he squeezed back last night. I tell myself he did. The nurse checks the IV port, clear tubing like a glass vein. Dr. Halverson glances at the clock. We'll begin anesthesia in a moment. Her eyes flick toward the observation glass, toward Sloane's parted lips, the neat pearl of Mrs. Kincaid's earring, the tight knot of Mr. Kincaid's jaw. Their reflections hover in the glass like small truths I have refused to look at straight on. My name shakes in my throat. Doctor? Yes, Mrs. Duarte. If I asked you to wait 1 minute, would the world end? The world rarely ends in a minute, she says. It changes, though. I nod, and that's when the door blasts open like a storm has been waiting outside the entire time. A small shape rockets through the gap, sneakers screeching, breath hitching. Theo, my grandson, 10 years old and too brave for the day his life handed him. His school shirt is wrinkled, a smear of something green at the hem, hair wild where it's escaped his stubborn part. He clutches a cracked phone, the case bitten up along the edge like a dog worried it. A nurse lunges after him. Sweetheart, you can't. But Theo ducks and weaves with the genius of children who have played tag in tight kitchens. He stops at my side, cheeks blazing. Grandma, he says, and the word is both a plea and a key, unlocking every locked thing inside my ribs. Please don't let them start. I have to tell you why Dad really needs your kidney. Silence falls the way glass falls hard, dangerous, loud, even when it makes no sound. Somewhere, an instrument slips from a gloved hand and kisses the floor with a ringing that seems to go on past hearing. The monitor keeps its ruthless tempo, unbothered by the world collapsing. On the other side of the glass, Sloane slams her palm flat, lips shaping the word no, as if she could push it into the room. Mrs. Kincaid stiffens. Mr. Kincaid steps forward, the tilt of his chin an order he thinks will be obeyed by virtue of having issued it all his life. Their faces are a trio of masks, polished dread, choreographed outrage, curated disbelief. Theodore, the recovery nurse says, kneeling eye level, this is a sterile area. If you'll come with me to the— Let him speak, Dr. Halverson says. The room rearranges itself around her voice. Take a step back, please. Elena? Her eyes move to mine, not to obtain consent because she will delay if she must, but to secure alliance. 1 minute, she adds, to the air, to the clock, to whatever in this room believes it outranks time. Theo's hands are shaking so hard the cracked phone chatters against the rail of my bed. I want to sit up, to pull him into the hollow under my chin where he used to sleep after cartoons knocked him out on my couch. Straps hold me in place. Fear holds the rest. It's okay, I tell him. My voice is hoarse. You're okay, my bird. I heard, Mom, he whispers, eyes darting to the glass where Sloane's mouth is a working bow. I recorded it. She said after the transplant the numbers would be perfect, and that you wouldn't dare say no. She was laughing. A single tear spills down his hot cheek, leaving a shining trail like a slug's swerve across a stone. Grandma, she put blue pills in Dad's water. She said it makes the tests show they need your kidney. She said the buyer wants clean before and after. Buyer. The word lands like a nail driven through the table. Something slow and dark uncoils in me, a rope I have been pretending is a snake that wouldn't bite. Show me, Dr. Halverson says, already snapping for a sterile sleeve. The charge nurse slides a clear plastic bag over the phone so the boy can still use the screen. The anesthetist, to his credit, moves the syringe tray 3 inches farther away as if distance can hold off history. Sloane's voice bangs through the glass, bright with panic. This is ridiculous. He's a child. Elena, do not listen to this. This is sick. Someone put him up to it. Mrs. Kincaid's pearls tremble. Mr. Kincaid pounds the glass with the side of his fist once, twice, 3 measured times. Even his anger has a trusty cadence. Theo's thumb fumbles. The phone stutters awake. A thumbnail of a voice memo sits at the top labeled in a child's sure block letters. Mom Night Talk. He glances at me. For a breath, I see the toddler who used to hide shells in my herb planters, his pockets smelling of salt and damp lint. I nod. Courage, I tell him. We pass it down. He taps. The first second is muffled fabric rasping, a door creak, the inhale of someone who has learned to breathe like a thief. Then Sloane's voice, indisputable as a signature. After the transplant, she says, whisper, bright, amusement plucking the words. The metrics will be clean, that's the point, Mother. Baseline corrupted, intervention, then pristine post-op data. They pay for before and after. She'll sign. She's sentimental and poor. It's practically charity. Someone in the room swears under their breath. I realize it's me. Mrs. Kincaid's voice answers in the recording, thin as piano wire. And Rook confirms the escrow is ready? I won't tolerate Savannah prices for Miami risk. Theo's small hand tightens around the rail as if he could hold me in this bed long enough for the truth to finish unfurling. Beyond the glass, Sloane shakes her head hard, words forming on her lips like lies grown from cuttings. Edited, fake, taken out of context. But panic has a smell. It is unmistakable. It rides the air like heat off asphalt. Dr. Halverson lifts her chin. Stop all preparations. Her voice is a door closing. A nurse withdraws the IV syringe. Another hits a red toggle that changes the lights from go to hold. We are not inducing, not until I speak to compliance. Sloane slaps the glass again, and her voice, though we can't hear it, forms one command with perfect clarity. Don't you dare. My grandson's chest shudders. He is trying to be taller than his fear. He reaches for another file on the phone, a rectangle of video this time, a parking garage damp with tinny rain, a man in a cap taking a white pharmacy bag from a hand I recognize even in pixels smear my daughter-in-law's. The monitor beside me ticks on, patient as tide against rock. My heart answers it, a stubborn drum. I look at Theo and I know the ground has moved under all of us, and that it is possible, after all, to be saved by a child who has decided he will not be quiet. Grandma, he says softly, as if he is afraid of breaking me. Please don't give them your kidney. Not for this. I don't know how long the room stayed frozen after Theo's words, but time in that moment felt like it had lost its usual rules. The air was too heavy, and each breath I tried to draw was a battle. Nurses looked at one another with wide eyes, hands hovering in the air, waiting for orders that hadn't yet come. The recording still echoed inside me, even though the phone had gone dark. My grandson's trembling voice had sliced something open, and now the silence pressed on the wound. Dr. Halverson was the first to move. She snapped off her gloves with a sharp crack and turned to the staff. Secure this phone in evidence protocol. Notify hospital compliance immediately. No anesthesia until I say otherwise. Her voice was brisk, measured, the kind of tone that could keep chaos from spilling into violence. I caught the faint tremor in her hand as she reached for the clipboard. Even she wasn't immune. Theo was still at my side, his small hand clamped around mine like he was trying to keep me from sliding into some abyss. His eyes dark and frightened but burning with certainty were the only steady thing in the room. I wanted to sit up and fold him into my arms, shield him from the storm he had just unleashed, but I couldn't move. My body was strapped to cold steel, and my heart was chained to a fear deeper than anything I'd ever known. Through the glass, Sloane's face had collapsed. Her icy poise cracked into something wild, desperate. She was pounding on the observation window now, her mouth twisting around words I couldn't hear but understood all the same. Don't listen. Lies. Manipulation. Mrs. Kincaid clutched her pearls with shaking hands, while her husband barked at a young orderly in a suit, gesturing sharply as if his money could still rewrite the laws of physics. But panic has its own language, and it was written across all three of their faces. And me? I was caught between two worlds, the one where Noah was simply sick and needed me, and the one Theo's trembling voice had just painted. A world where sickness wasn't an accident of life, but the work of careful hands dosing him drop by drop. I could feel the ground tilting beneath me, my trust crumbling like brittle plaster. Dr. Halverson came closer. Mrs. Duarte, she said, her voice low but firm, do you want to proceed? She didn't say with the surgery. She meant, do you want to keep believing? Do you want to keep carrying this story they've fed you? My lips parted, but no words came. My throat was thick, my tongue leaden. I looked at Theo instead. My grandson, clutching that cracked phone like it was holy scripture. A boy who should have been chasing soccer balls in the yard, not evidence in the shadows of his mother's schemes. I closed my eyes, and the darkness behind them filled not with comfort but with memory. Savannah nights, thick with humidity, when the market stalls closed, and I'd count every dollar by the dim bulb in my kitchen. Miguel before the stroke, laughing and spinning me under the peeling ceiling fan. My boys small, barefoot, sticky with peaches, promising me they'd take care of me one day. And then the image of Noah, older, gaunt, clutching his side and forcing a smile when I begged him to see a doctor. That's how all this began. With a pain in my son's body and a coldness in my daughter-in-law's eyes that I had ignored too many times. I opened my eyes again, and in the brightness of the surgical lamps, I knew the past would no longer protect me. This wasn't just an illness. It was a plan. And my blood, my body, my life had been written into it without my consent. Elena, Dr. Halverson said again, you don't have to answer now, but you must know this changes everything. I managed a single nod. My mouth was too dry to speak. Theo leaned close, his whisper hot against my ear. Grandma, please believe me. I squeezed his hand as best as I could with the IV taped to my skin. I do, Bird, I rasped. I do. They wheeled me back to a waiting room, but I barely noticed the motion. My mind was still in that operating theater, replaying Theo's words like a broken hymn. The antiseptic smell clung to me. I felt it crawling into my lungs, my clothes, even the grooves of my skin. Theo sat beside me now, smaller than ever in the vast vinyl chair, his knuckles white as he clutched the phone. A security guard stood by the door, his arms crossed, eyes flicking from me to the boy, to the hallway beyond. He wasn't there for me. He was there because of what had just broken loose. And on the other side of that glass, Sloane had glared at me as if she could will me into silence. Her parents hovering, their composure thinning like cheap silk. I could almost hear Mrs. Kincaid's shrill voice through the walls. Control the narrative, shut it down before it spreads. But it had already spread. Into my chest, into my bones. Into every moment I had doubted my instincts and buried my unease beneath the word duty. I stared at Theo's small shoulders. How long have you known? My voice sounded ragged, like it belonged to someone else. He didn't look up. I don't know. Weeks? Months? She talks on the phone at night, sometimes with Grandpa Kincaid, sometimes with that man in the parking garage. She says things about pills and numbers and data. His voice cracked. I heard her once say you'd be too scared to refuse. Too scared. My stomach twisted. Was that how my daughter-in-law saw me? An old woman too tired, too beaten down by years of scraping and patching and surviving to fight back? Theo finally lifted his eyes to me. I wanted to tell you sooner, but, she said if I told anyone, Dad would die. My heart cracked. I pulled his hand into mine, as much as the IV allowed. You were so brave, my bird. Braver than I ever was. The guard shifted his weight. Outside, a nurse bustled past, her sneakers squeaking on the tile. The hospital kept breathing around us, indifferent to the truth unraveling in its walls. And suddenly, memory pulled me backward, to the little house that had always been my anchor. Savannah summers are a weight you carry on your chest, heat so thick it feels alive, buzzing with cicadas. In my kitchen, the fan squeaked as it turned, stirring air that smelled of collard greens and vinegar. That house had been my battlefield, where I stitched and sold and scraped to raise my boys. Miguel used to say I was tougher than the bricks holding the place together. But after his stroke, after his silence, it was only me. Me against bills, me against exhaustion, me against the small voice that whispered, maybe you deserve more than this. And then, Sloane entered our lives. She arrived with polished smiles and casseroles too perfect to be real. She kissed Noah's cheek like she'd been rehearsing. She carried pill bottles in her bag like secrets, rattling faintly when she walked through my door. At first I told myself it was love. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, her eyes hardened into something colder than marble. I remembered one night clearly, stepping out to the yard for laundry, catching her on the phone, voice low and sharp. Don't worry, she had said. Everything is on schedule. Once we have the post-op numbers, the contract is locked. When I asked, she jumped, plastering on a laugh. Just a friend, Elena. You know how girlfriends chatter. And I had swallowed it. Because I was tired. Because Noah loved her. Because the world had told me again and again that doubting your own family was a kind of sin. But sins rot in the dark. And now the rot had reached me, strapped me to a table, ready to carve me open in the name of duty. Theo's small fingers pressed against mine, dragging me back to the fluorescent light of the waiting room. His voice was steady now, steady in a way a child's should never have to be. "We can't let them do it, Grandma. Not until you know the truth." I looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the faint spark of something I thought I had lost. Not just fear, not just resignation, something sharper, a seed of defiance taking root. That night, when they finally let me go home under observation hold, Savannah's air felt thicker than ever. The streets glistened under a late rain, street lamps smearing their reflections across the cobblestones. I clutched Theo's hand as we walked up the porch steps to my narrow house, and for a moment, I wondered if my little home could bear the weight of what I was carrying. Inside, Miguel sat in his old chair, eyes vacant but following us, as though some piece of him still understood. His wheelchair squeaked as I pushed him closer to the window. I wanted to tell him everything, but his silence was heavier than stone. So instead, I just laid my palm over his, whispering, "Something's wrong, Miguel, and I think it's bigger than we ever guessed." His hand twitched. Maybe reflex, maybe reply. Later, in the kitchen, I found Lucas waiting, his shirt damp with grease stains from the job, his boots leaving damp prints on the linoleum. He'd heard the whispers already. Savannah carries gossip faster than the tide. His jaw clenched when I told him what Theo had shown, what he had heard. "I knew it," Lucas muttered, pulling a crumpled envelope from his back pocket. Inside were glossy photos, dim and grainy, but clear enough. Sloan under the hospital's parking structure, handing off a white pharmacy bag to a man in a black cap. The same man Theo had whispered about, the one he called the buyer. "I followed her last week," Lucas said. "Didn't want to worry you. But Mom, this isn't about Noah's sickness. It's about something she's running with those Kincaids." The photo shook in my hand. I wanted to deny it, to claim it was coincidence, some innocent errand misunderstood, but the pieces were too many now. Theo's recordings, Lucas's photos, the pills I'd seen Sloan slip into Noah's glass, all threads tightening into a noose around us. "I'll go to the police," Lucas continued. His eyes burned with anger, the same way Miguel's had when he was young and proud. "This isn't just family trouble anymore. It's crime." But fear crawled down my spine. "Do you think they'll believe us?" I asked. "Or will they say we're just bitter, clinging to suspicion because we don't want to see Noah's wife as the saint she pretends to be?" Lucas slammed his palm against the counter. The plates rattled. "Then we show them proof they can't ignore." As if summoned by his words, Theo shuffled into the kitchen, still clutching the cracked phone. His voice was small, but his eyes were fierce. "There's more. I didn't play everything." He tapped the screen, pulling up a second file. The recording crackled, and then Sloane's voice filled the room again, cold and sharp. "Don't worry. After the transplant, the metrics will be perfect. Clean data is worth 10 times more. She won't fight. She's desperate to save him." And then Mrs. Kincaid's reply, dripping with disdain. "That old woman doesn't realize she's our ticket. Once the tests are logged, we're free." The kitchen seemed to tilt around me. I grabbed the edge of the table, my breath coming in shallow bursts. They're using Noah. They're using me," I whispered. Theo's lip trembled, but he stood taller, as though he could hold us both up. "We have to stop them." Lucas nodded firmly. "Then we fight. We take this to someone who can't be bought." I stared at my 2 boys, one grown and battle-worn, the other too young to carry such a heavy truth, and something inside me hardened. For years I had let duty bend me, weigh me down, silence me. But tonight, standing in my own kitchen with my grandson's proof and my younger son's defiance, I felt a shift. Fear was still there, yes, but alongside it came something sharper, a seed of steel in my chest, whispering that I would no longer be the pawn in Sloane's game. The next morning, I woke to the sound of cicadas screaming in the damp air. Savannah heat seeps into your bones even before the sun climbs over the rooftops, and as I sat up from my narrow bed, sweat already traced the back of my neck. But the weight I carried wasn't the heat. It was choice. I poured tea spearmint from my own garden and sat at the chipped kitchen table. Lucas paced the floor, restless as a caged panther. Theo sat quiet, fiddling with his phone, thumb hovering near the play button of those terrible recordings. Miguel watched us all from his chair by the window, his silence more pressing than any words. The knock came sharp and early. When I opened the door, there she was, Sloane. Not a hair out of place, her blouse pressed crisp, her eyes glittering with a steel I had mistaken once for devotion. Behind her stood her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Kincaid, smiling as though they were stepping into a country club brunch. "Elena," Sloane said smoothly, brushing past me without waiting for permission. "We don't have time to waste. Dr. Halverson needs your final consent confirmed today. Noah's clock is ticking." Her mother slid into my best chair, as if it belonged to her, setting down a basket of fruit too perfect, too polished. "A real mother doesn't hesitate, Mrs." Kincaid said, her voice sugar-coated but cutting. "She does what's necessary. Reputation, family, all depend on you." I stood rooted in the doorway, the teapot in my hand, trembling. Their eyes pinned me, sharp as nails. Duty, they called it. A mother's role. As if I were nothing more than a vessel to be emptied for their gain. Before I could summon words, Lucas spoke. His voice was low, dangerous. Enough. He tossed the photos onto the table. The glossy print slid across the wood, fanning out like accusations. Sloane in the parking garage, trading bags with that man in the cap. Sloane holding a small envelope, slipping it into her purse. Sloane's mask flickered, just for an instant, then she laughed, brittle as glass. Staged. Anyone with a camera can make trouble. "You really think the hospital will take a mechanic's word over mine?" Theo rose from his chair, small but unyielding. "It's not just photos," he said, holding up the cracked phone. "I have your voice, Mom. I heard what you said about Grandma, about the buyer." For the first time, Sloane's confidence faltered. She darted a glance at her parents. Mr. Kincaid leaned forward, his voice a growl. "Delete it. Now. That boy doesn't understand what he's playing with." But Theo didn't move. His hand was steady, his eyes locked on mine. I drew in a breath, my chest heavy but certain. "Number, he understands more than any of you, and I understand now too. This isn't about saving Noah, it's about profit, about using me." Mrs. Kincaid slammed her cane against the floor, the sound sharp as thunder in the small kitchen. "You wicked woman, twisting a child's mind against his mother. Do you want your son to die?" Her words sliced through me, reopening every wound I had from years of sacrifice. But this time, I didn't flinch. Lucas stepped closer, planting himself between me and them. "You won't bully her anymore. Not here." The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the whir of the ceiling fan and the faint creak of Miguel's wheelchair as he shifted ever so slightly, eyes narrowed on our intruders. For the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me, a flicker of strength, long buried but not gone. I set the teapot down with a firm clatter and looked straight at Sloane. "I will save my son, but not your way. Not with your lies wrapped around my neck." Her eyes narrowed, and I saw the mask peel back, revealing something colder, more dangerous. "Then you've just signed your own ruin," she whispered. But in that moment, I no longer feared ruin. I feared silence, and silence was something I refused to give them again. That night, after the Kincaids finally stormed out of my kitchen, the house sank into a heavy quiet. The fruit basket they'd left sat untouched on the table, the glossy apples and pears shining too brightly under the weak bulb. I wanted to throw it all out into the yard, but my body was trembling too hard to move. Lucas leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, jaw clenched tight. "They won't stop, Mom," he said. "They think they own this town, this hospital, us." His words were low, but the fury inside them hummed like live wire. Theo sat curled up on the couch with his backpack. the cracked phone tucked close to his chest like it was armor. I went over and brushed his hair back, the way I used to when he was little and fighting sleep after cartoons. His eyes met mine, tired, scared, but burning. "Grandma," he whispered, "if we don't tell someone, they'll just keep going." He was right. I knew it. But who would believe us? The Kincaids were pillars of Savannah society. Old family money, the kind that bought silence and bent laws. I was just a tired widow with calloused hands and a sick son. What voice did I have compared to theirs? Still, the truth had been cracked open. It couldn't be shut again. The next morning, I called Dr. Halverson's office. When she picked up, her voice was calm, but I caught the edge beneath it. She'd been waiting for my call. "Mrs. Duarte," she said, "I saw enough yesterday to know something's wrong. If you have more, bring it to me, quietly." My hands trembled as I clutched the phone. "There are recordings," I admitted. "Photos. Proof that Sloane and her parents are planning something, using Noah, using me." There was a pause on the other end, the silence of someone calculating how deep the rot went. Finally, she spoke. "Bring everything tonight. Don't go through the front lobby. Use the side entrance by the loading dock. I'll have someone I trust meet you." That evening, Lucas drove me in his old truck, the one that rattled over every bump in the road. Theo sat between us, clutching the phone, his little shoulders stiff with determination. Savannah's streets were quiet, the gas lamps casting long shadows across the cobblestones, as if the city itself knew what secrets we carried. We slipped through the loading dock and into a narrow corridor that smelled of bleach and old air. A woman was waiting there, tall, sharp-eyed, with a badge that read Marcy Ellison, patient advocate. Her grip was firm when she shook my hand, and her eyes told me she was no stranger to families crushed by power. "Let me see what you have," Marcy said. Theo handed over the phone. She slid it into a protective bag and pressed play. The hallway filled with Sloane's voice, low and cold. "After the transplant, the metrics will be perfect. Clean data is worth 10 times more. She won't dare refuse." Marcy's jaw tightened. I knew something smelled wrong. I've seen their donations buying too many closed doors. She looked at me with a fierce steadiness. "You're not alone anymore, Mrs. Duarte. We'll stop this." For the first time in weeks, I felt the faintest thread of relief. Not victory, just a sliver of hope that maybe I wasn't powerless. But hope is fragile. As we turned to leave, I caught sight of a figure at the end of the corridor. A man in a black cap, leaning against the wall, eyes hidden in shadow. He was watching us, waiting. Lucas moved in front of me, tense as a drawn bow. Theo clutched my arm so hard it hurt, and I knew with icy certainty that whatever storm we had stepped into was only just beginning. The man in the black cap didn't move. He just stood at the end of the corridor, arms folded, the tilt of his head almost mocking. My breath snagged in my chest. I recognized the posture even before my mind named him Rook, the courier, the shadow that had been circling my family like a vulture. Marcy stepped forward, her voice clipped. "This is a restricted area. Who authorized you?" No answer. Just a smirk and the faint scrape of his boot against the linoleum. Then, without hurry, he turned and disappeared into the stairwell, his steps echoing like a warning. Lucas cursed under his breath. "He knows we've got something." Marcy tightened her grip on the evidence bag. "Let him know. It means they're nervous. Nervous people make mistakes." She turned to me. "Stay sharp, Mrs. Duarte, and keep Theo close. If they think the boy is the weak link, they'll push there." My heart stuttered. The thought of those people, those wolves in silk clothes looking at my grandson as leverage made bile rise in my throat. I pulled Theo closer, feeling his small body tense against mine. He was only 10. He should have been safe in a schoolyard, not dragged into conspiracies spun by adults with too much greed and too little soul. When we got home that night, the house felt different. I checked every lock twice, pulled the curtains shut, and still couldn't shake the feeling of eyes pressing against the windows. Miguel stirred faintly in his chair as if sensing the change. I whispered to him, "We're in deeper than ever, love, but I won't let them break us." The next few days unfolded in a haze of unease. Noah's health declined further. Each time I saw him, his eyes were duller, his cheeks more hollow. He smiled faintly when I came in, but behind it I saw only exhaustion. He had no idea that the very person spooning soup into his mouth was the one tightening the noose around his life. And still, Sloane played her role flawlessly. She fussed over Noah in front of the nurses, asked sharp questions at the desk, always presenting herself as the devoted wife. But I watched her too closely now to be fooled. Her smiles didn't touch her eyes. Her hands trembled only when she thought no one was looking. One afternoon, while delivering food to Noah's room, I saw it with my own eyes. A small, unlabeled pill bottle, half hidden under a folded napkin on the nightstand. I picked it up, my heart thundering. The pills inside were pale blue, just like the ones I'd once seen her slip into his glass. "What's this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Sloane swooped in like a hawk, snatching the bottle from my hand. "Vitamins," she said too quickly. "Doctor's orders, you don't need to worry." But her eyes betrayed her, flashing with panic before she smoothed her face back into the mask of care. Later, I cornered one of the on-call doctors. "Has Noah been prescribed anything new? Supplements? Blue capsules?" The doctor frowned, checked the chart, then shook his head. "Number no new meds, only what's documented here. Anything else is unauthorized." Unauthorized. The word cut through me like a blade. That night, Lucas showed me the latest photos. Blurry but damning. Sloane in the parking garage again, handing Rook another bag. This time, in exchange for a thick envelope he slipped into her purse. "We've got her," Lucas said, fire in his eyes. "It's just a matter of getting the right people to listen." But I wasn't sure if the right people existed anymore. Theo came over with his backpack and his cracked phone. His hands shook as he pulled up another file. "Grandma, there's more," he whispered. The recording was grainy, voices muffled, but clear enough. Sloane and Mrs. Kincaid again. "After the transplant, the tests will make the story watertight," Mrs. Kincaid said. "No one will question it. The lab numbers are the proof. Once the results are in, we'll sell them offshore. It'll be worth more than any foundation donation." My knees buckled. I sat hard in my chair, the weight of their scheme crashing down on me. They weren't just poisoning Noah slowly. They were using his suffering, my body, my blood, as nothing more than a science experiment for profit. Theo's eyes brimmed with tears, but his chin lifted. "Now, do you believe me, Grandma?" I pulled him against me, my tears falling hot into his hair. "I do, Bird, I do." And in that moment, I knew the fight was no longer optional. If I stayed silent, Noah would die. And if I gave them my kidney, I would hand them the victory they were so sure was already theirs. I couldn't be silent any longer. The next morning, I didn't open my market stall. My baskets of peaches and collards sat untouched on the counter, their sweetness souring in the heat. Instead, I sat at the table with Lucas and Theo, the cracked phone between us like a loaded weapon. "We can't just sit on this," Lucas said. His voice was rough, scraped with sleeplessness. "The longer we wait, the more dangerous it gets for Noah, for Mom, for all of us." Theo clutched his backpack straps, his little shoulders squared with a resolve no child should have to wear. "If we don't tell, she wins." His voice was steady, but I could see the tremor in his hands. I stared at them both, my sons one grown, one still a boy, and felt something uncoil inside me. All these years I had bent under duty, under sacrifice, under the lie that silence was the same as love. But silence had brought us here. Silence had let Sloane and the Kincaids sink their claws in. "We tell," I said, my voice firmer than I expected, "but we tell the right person." That evening, under a sky bruised with storm clouds, Lucas drove us back to the hospital. We used the side entrance again. The one by the loading dock, where the air smelled of bleach and old rain. Marcy Ellison was waiting, her stance taut like a soldier's. She ushered us into a cramped office lined with file cabinets. "Show me everything," she said. Theo slid the phone into her hands. Lucas spread the photos across her desk. My heart thundered as Sloane's voice filled the room again, dripping with greed, cold with certainty. Marcy didn't flinch. She took notes, her pen stabbing the paper. "This is bigger than family drama. This is organized exploitation, medical data laundering." She looked up at me. "If you hadn't come forward, Mrs. Duarte, they'd have buried you right alongside your son." Her words chilled me, but they also lit something fierce in my chest. For the first time, someone outside my bloodline believed me. Believed us. "I'll escalate this," Marcy continued. "Compliance, then law enforcement. But you need to prepare. They'll fight. People with money and power always do. They'll twist stories, buy witnesses, smear your name. You have to be ready to stand firm." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "I've stood alone all my life. I can stand again." Lucas's hand gripped mine, rough and warm. Theo pressed close against my side. In that cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets and the hum of a tired fluorescent light, we weren't just a family anymore, we were a line drawn in the sand. When we left, the storm finally broke. Rain hammered the streets, turning Savannah's cobblestones slick and shining. We hurried to the truck, Theo clinging to me, Lucas scanning the shadows. And that's when I saw him again, Rook, leaning beneath a street lamp, the rain sliding off his black cap. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched us, a silent promise in the storm. I shivered, clutching Theo closer. For all Marcy's confidence, I knew the battle was only beginning. We had truth, yes, but they had reach. And the fight for my son's life was about to erupt into something far larger than I had ever imagined. The day of the scheduled surgery returned like a tidal wave. Dawn had barely cracked the horizon when the ambulance came to collect me. The siren wasn't on, but its silent presence outside my home felt like a funeral bell. I clutched my fabric bag inside, just a change of clothes and the embroidered handkerchief Miguel had given me the day we married. It was meant to be my comfort. Instead, it felt like a shroud. Sloane rode in the front beside the driver, her profile sharp against the rain-blurred window. Even from behind, I could see the stiffness in her shoulders, the clenched jaw. She wasn't afraid for Noah, she was afraid her plan was about to unravel. At the hospital, the halls buzzed louder than usual. Nurses moved in sharp lines, clipboards in hand. Mr. and Mrs. Kincaid were already there, dressed as though for a gala, her in a crimson dress, him in a charcoal suit, both smiling too brightly, like hosts greeting guests at a masquerade. They shook hands with doctors, thanked administrators, their voices dripping with charm that tasted to me like poison. I was wheeled past them into the preparation wing. The antiseptic smell hit me like a wave, sharper than before, as though the air itself wanted to erase me. They settled me on a gurney, strapped my arms, clipped monitors to my chest. Every beep felt like a countdown. But beneath it all, my heart wasn't only pounding with fear, it was burning with something else. A stubborn, defiant fire that had been growing ever since Theo had burst into that room. Through the glass window, I caught sight of Lucas pacing the waiting area, his eyes sharp, fists clenched. Beside him, Theo stood with Marcy, his little backpack slung across his shoulder. I saw the cracked phone in his grip, and relief coursed through me like a jolt of lightning. Sloane appeared again on the other side of the operating room glass. She leaned close, her lips shaping words like venom. "Sign it. Now. Do it." Her hand sliced the air, a silent command. Dr. Halverson stood by my side, her expression unreadable, but her presence steadying. "We're about to begin, Mrs. Duarte," she said, but there was a weight in her tone, a question hidden beneath her professional calm. The nurse approached with the syringe. The anesthesia gleamed under the surgical light. My chest grew heavy, not with surrender, but with certainty. Something was about to break. And then it happened. The door to the operating room burst open with a metallic crash, slamming against the wall so hard the instrument tray rattled. Cold air rushed in. Theo charged through, sneakers soaked from rain, hair plastered to his forehead. He was panting, his chest heaving, but his eyes, those eyes were fierce. He clutched the cracked phone like it was a sword. "Grandma!" His voice cut through the room, clear and trembling. "I have to tell everyone why Dad really needs your kidney." The heart monitor screeched in my ears, every beep now thunder. The room froze, the nurses, the anesthetist, even Dr. Halverson. One doctor dropped his forceps, the clang echoing like a bell of judgment. Through the glass, Sloane slammed her hands against the window, her mouth twisting in a scream we couldn't hear. Mrs. Kincaid gripped her husband's arm, her pearls shaking at her throat. Theo stepped forward, his little chest rising and falling with the weight of the truth he carried. His thumb pressed the screen, and then Sloane's own voice spilled into the sterile silence. "After the transplant, the metrics will be perfect. She won't dare refuse. The buyer wants clean before and after." The words were a blade, and suddenly there was no going back. The sound of her voice, so unmistakable, so cold, hung in the operating room like smoke after a fire. Everyone froze. Even the machines seemed to hesitate, the steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor slowing into a dreadful rhythm that pressed against my chest. Theo held the phone high, his small hands shaking but steady enough to keep the recording playing. "Metrics will be perfect. Clean data is worth 10 times more. She won't dare refuse." The nurses glanced at each other in shock, their faces pale. One of them backed away from the anesthesia tray, her hands trembling. Dr. Halverson raised her hand, her voice sharp and commanding. "Stop all preparations, now." The anesthetist lowered the syringe, his expression stunned. The scalpel tray was pushed back. The lights above dimmed. For a moment, I thought I might collapse from the sudden release of pressure. Through the glass, Sloane's composure shattered. She pounded the window with her palm, her mouth forming frantic denials. "Lies, lies. He's a child. He doesn't know what he's saying." But her eyes, wild, darting, cornered, told the truth she couldn't hide. Then Lucas burst into the room, shoving past the orderly, trying to block him. His shirt was damp, his boots caked with mud, his eyes burning with fury. In his hand, he held a folded envelope of photographs. He slammed them down on the metal table, the images fanning out Sloane in the garage, the pharmacy bag, Rook's shadowed face. "This isn't just talk," Lucas growled, his voice shaking. "This is proof." The room buzzed with whispers, the kind that ripple like a storm surge. The younger nurses leaned closer, eyes wide, as the images passed from hand to hand. Dr. Halverson studied the photos, then looked back at me. Her gaze was no longer just professional, it was protective. "This operating room," she said firmly, "is now a crime scene." A hush fell. For the first time, the power shifted. Mrs. Kincaid shrieked through the glass, her face contorted. She banged her cane against the floor outside, her pearls rattling like loose bones. "Mr. Kincaid shoved a thick envelope at a junior doctor in the hallway, his lips moving fast, bribes in plain sight. But the young doctor shook his head, backing away, fear and disgust written across his face. Theo's breath hitched. He wasn't finished. His thumb tapped another file, and suddenly the room filled with a second recording, Mrs. Kincaid's voice, sharp as broken glass. "Once the tests are logged, we'll sell them offshore. It'll be worth more than any foundation donation." Gasps rippled through the staff. One nurse covered her mouth. Another muttered a prayer under her breath. My heart clenched, but not from fear. Relief, horrid, burning relief, coursed through me. The truth was finally dragging itself into the light. Sloane screamed, her face twisted in panic. She lunged at the door, trying to wrench it open, but security had already arrived. 2 officers gripped her arms as she thrashed and kicked. "Mrs. Kincaid wailed, clutching at her pearls as if they might strangle her into silence. Mr. Kincaid shouted about reputation, legacy, donations, his voice a desperate thunder. Lucas stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You used my brother. You tried to bleed our family dry." His voice shook, not from fear, but from fury so old it felt like it had been waiting for this moment. And me, I lay there on the table, tears streaming down my face, my body trembling. But I wasn't trembling from terror anymore. For the first time in months, I was trembling with release. My grandson had saved me. My son had defended me. And the truth, at long last, was louder than their lies. Chaos cracked the air like a whip. Officers swarmed the corridor outside the observation window, their radios hissing with clipped voices. Sloane thrashed between them, her hair wild, her screams breaking into shrill fragments. "It's not true. I was protecting him. You don't understand." But even as she said it, her eyes darted like a hunted animal's, searching for an escape that no longer existed. Mrs. Kincaid clung to her pearls, her face chalk white, her mouth spewing venom. "This is slander. You've poisoned the mind of a child. You'll pay for this." Her cane hammered against the tile, each strike a desperate attempt to hold on to a power that was slipping away. Mr. Kincaid's composure cracked at last. His voice bellowed over the din, desperate and raw. "Do you know who we are? This hospital owes us everything. Everything. We'll bury you in lawsuits." But no one listened. Not anymore. Dr. Halverson's expression was granite. She faced the officers, her voice steady. "This operation is canceled. The patient will be stabilized through dialysis and alternative therapies. And I want this entire case escalated immediately." Her eyes flicked toward me, softer now. "You saved more than yourself today, Mrs. Duarte. You saved the integrity of this hospital." Lucas moved to my side, his calloused hand wrapping around mine. The anger in his eyes gave way to something gentler, something that looked like pride. "You're free, Mom," he said, his voice choked. "They can't use you anymore." Theo, still clutching the cracked phone, pressed himself into my other side. His little chest heaved with sobs, but he didn't let go of me. "I was so scared," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But I couldn't let them hurt you." I turned my face to him, my tears mingling with his. "You were braver than all of us, Bird, braver than I ever knew." From the adjoining room, I heard Noah's weak voice calling out, "What's happening, Mom? Why is everyone yelling?" My heart ached. He didn't understand the full horror of what his wife had done to him. He only knew pain, and the betrayal was yet to come. I pushed myself up on the table, against the nurse's protests. My legs trembled, but I stood anyway. I needed him to see me upright, alive, not as their victim, but as his mother, still standing. When I entered his room, Noah's hollow eyes met mine. Confusion clouded his face. They said, "You were giving me your kidney, that you'd save me." I sat beside him, taking his hand in mine. His skin was clammy, fragile, but it was still my boy's hand. "I will save you," I whispered, "but not by letting them use me, not by letting them poison you for their greed." His lips parted, trembling. "Sloane?" The word shattered me, because I saw the hope flicker there, the need to believe the woman he loved hadn't betrayed him. My tears fell onto his hand. "She hurt you, Noah. She was never trying to save you. But we will. Lucas, Theo, me will fight for you." Noah turned his face away, tears slipping into his pillow. His body shook with silent sobs, the truth cutting deeper than the sickness ever had. I stroked his hair, whispering, "It's not your fault, son. Love can blind us all." Behind me, Lucas stood at the doorway, fists clenched but eyes wet, and Theo, my little warrior, hovered close, his gaze locked on his father, his young face carrying a grief no child should bear. That night, after the police hauled Sloane and the Kincaids away, the headlines lit up across Savannah. Socialite couple and hospital staff arrested in medical data scandal. Photographs showed the Kincaids shielding their faces. Sloane's mascara streaked down her cheeks, her wrists in cuffs. And me? I sat at my kitchen table with Lucas and Theo, Miguel silent in his chair beside us, the sound of rain on the roof steady and cleansing. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of their lies pressing on my chest. But as I looked into my grandson's weary eyes, I knew the war wasn't over. The law would take its course, yes. The world would learn what the Kincaids had done. Yet the deeper battle, the one inside Noah's broken heart, inside the scarred trust of our family, had only just begun. The days that followed blurred into a strange mixture of relief and grief. The police kept coming, asking questions, collecting evidence, taking statements. Lucas handed over every photo he'd taken, every detail he had tracked. Theo's cracked phone became the key to it all, its little memory card holding the proof that no one could deny. The headlines screamed louder each morning. Kincaid family tied to international data laundering ring, pharmaceutical courier, known as Rook in custody. Local woman nearly forced into kidney transplant scheme. My name was never printed, but in Savannah, everyone knew. At the market, people looked at me differently. Some whispered, others touched my arm gently and said, "God bless you, Elena. You're brave." I didn't feel brave. I felt stripped raw. Noah was placed on dialysis and monitored closely. His body, so worn down by Sloane's hidden poisons, began slowly to fight back once the drugs were cleared from his system. Each time I sat beside him, I stroked his hair and whispered the same words. "You're still here, son. That's enough for me." But his eyes, once so full of warmth, were shadowed now, haunted by betrayal. One night, as the machines hummed beside his bed, Noah's voice broke through the quiet. "Mom," he whispered, his throat tight. "I let her hurt you. I let her hurt me. I should have seen." I took his hand, pressed it against my heart. "You loved her. You trusted her. That isn't a sin, Noah. The sin was hers, and she'll answer for it." His tears soaked the pillow. I held him the way I had when he was a boy, feverish with scarlet rash, the way I always had when the world broke him. And in that moment, I understood. My role was not just to save his body, it was to help mend the wound Sloane had carved in his soul. At home, the weight shifted too. Lucas became my anchor, his presence steady, protective. He fixed the squeaky hinges on the back door, patched the leaks in the roof, always moving, always watching. And Theo, my little bird, became a kind of hero on our street. Neighbors brought him cookies, patted his head, called him brave. But when the house grew quiet, he curled against me and whispered, "I just didn't want them to take you away." I hugged him tight, whispering back, "You saved us all, Theo. Don't you ever forget it." One evening, after a long day at the hospital, I sat with Miguel in the fading light of our small living room. The cicadas sang outside, the air thick with summer. I told him everything from the recordings to the moment Sloane was dragged away in cuffs. I didn't know if he understood, but as I spoke, a tear slipped down his cheek. And then so faint I almost doubted it, his fingers curled around mine in a fragile squeeze. It broke me open. I wept into his shoulder, not from sorrow this time, but from the strange relief of knowing I wasn't carrying it all alone. Weeks later, the scandal spread beyond Savannah. National papers covered it. Commentators debated it. But in my little house, beneath my patched roof, the truth settled in quietly. I reopened my stall at the river market. Customers smiled at me, some curious, some kind. I stood straighter behind my table of peaches and collards, the calluses on my hands no longer a mark of exhaustion, but of survival. And in the quiet hours, I wrote in my diary by lamplight. Blood does not always define family. Sometimes it's courage, sometimes it's truth. I was nearly broken, nearly silenced, but I found my voice again. And no one, not Sloane, not the Kincaids, not fear itself, can take that from me. I closed the book, listening to the rain tapping against the tin roof of the porch. Theo's laughter drifted from the yard, Lucas's low voice calling after him. The sound wrapped around me like a promise. So if you're listening to my story now, tell me, where are you hearing it from? Tap like, leave a comment, and let me know how far this truth has traveled, because truth deserves to run farther than lies.